my red rose if I count the times I've burned. That feeling, that longing and resilience you hear in the music, it kind of sets the stage for where we're going today.
It really does. That blend of beauty and perhaps hardship.
Exactly. We're diving deep into a story from a place shaped by extremes. We've got source material here from Echoes of Lopnur, a Uyghur journey, and it gives us this really vivid snapshot of a unique community.
We're talking about the Lopnur Uyghurs, right? Sometimes called the people of the wind and sand.
That's them. And this source material, it's like a window into their world.
Yeah, and it highlights how their culture isn't just sort of located in that tough environment, the desert, the Tarim River. It feels like it was truly forged by it.
Right. So think of this as your shortcut, your way to really get the essence of their resilience, their customs, their whole way of life. Our mission today is basically to unpack the key nuggets from this source for you.
And show how that environment weaves itself into, well, pretty much everything. Food, hospitality, beliefs. It's all connected.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How those desert demands, and the gifts too, translate so directly into everyday life. It's like a masterclass in adaptation.
Absolutely. Ingenuity born from necessity.
So, speaking of necessities,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with food. Because it's never just about eating, is it? It tells a story.
Oh, completely. The source makes it really clear their diet comes straight from what's around them. The Tarim River means fish, lots of fish. And the desert edges provide certain meats, wild grains.
So fish is central. How do they prepare it? I imagine it's not just fried fish and chips.
No, definitely not. They boil it, grill it, dry it for later. And this is interesting. They even bury it in the sand for preservation.
Buried in sand. Okay, that's some serious desert engineering right there.
It really is using the environment,
Yeah.
that dry, stable temperature. And they make this nourishing soup from the dried fish, often adding wild jujube they gather.
Wild jujube. Foraging adds another layer. But it's not just fish, right? The source mentioned a signature meat dish.
Yes, kömme kawap. This one really stands out in the descriptions. It embodies their unique cooking.
Kömme kawap. Tell me about that. Sounds intriguing.
It's lamb, but the cooking method is pure desert tech. They seal the lamb inside a sheepskin pouch, keeps all the moisture and flavor in.
Okay.
And then they don't put it over a fire. They bury the whole pouch right in hot desert sand and embers.
Wow. So the desert itself is the oven.
Exactly. It slow cooks for hours. And the source, it describes the results so vividly. It says the meat gets so tender, the bones melt in your mouth.
So tender the bones melt in your mouth. That's incredible. It's not just cooking. It's using the landscape itself. Thermodynamics in action.
Precisely. It's a brilliant adaptation, turning limitations into tools. And then there's another ingredient the source talks about, yujol. Sounds completely unique.
Yujol, yes. What's that made from?
It comes from a desert plant called yukin. They use the flour, they dry it, grind it into flour.
Flour. Okay.
Yeah, and it's apparently incredibly energy dense. They store it and use it to make this, well, the source calls it powerful hava, or dumplings, often served with tea, which is everywhere.
Powerful hava. How powerful are we talking?
Well, get this, the source claims just 2 slices will keep you full all day.
Seriously. 2 slices.
That's what it says. Think about that in that environment. A portable, long-lasting energy source. It's not just finding food, it's like they've reverse-engineered survival from the desert floor.
Turning sand into an oven, obscure plants into superfuel. It's beyond just recipes.
Totally. These are survival strategies honed over centuries. Deep, deep adaptation.
Which tells you something about the people themselves, doesn't it? That resilience, that ingenuity within limits.
Absolutely. They didn't just find ways to live in the desert, they found ways to thrive from it, creating the system perfectly tailored to its demands.
And that idea, thriving through connection and adaptation,
Yeah.
it seemed to go way beyond just food. It's really strong in how they treat guests, right? Their hospitality.
Oh, yes. The source doesn't just say hospitality is important. It uses the word sacred. It's not casual. It's full of rituals.
Rituals. Like the meal itself has a specific order.
A very structured sequence, yeah. It starts with the essentials: tea, fresh bread, and that yujol hava we just mentioned, kind of foundational offerings.
Okay, the basics first, then the main courses.
Then comes the fish, often with its broth. After the fish, then the lamb, again, usually with its own soup. There's a clear progression.
Like different stages of welcome. How do you know when the meal's wrapping up?
The source points to usual porridge being served. That seems to be the signal that the main formal part of the meal is ending.
Interesting. Now, about the meat.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned lamb. The source says it's not just about getting a piece, right? There's a whole system.
Yeah, this is where it gets really layered. There are apparently 5 grades of meat, and what tut you receive directly reflects your status or how honored you are as a guest.
5 grades.
Yeah.
So what do the most honored guests get?
They get the absolute best parts, the tail fat, which is highly prized, and the whole haunch of lamb. Others might get ribs or neck pieces.
And the source said something like, even the bone matters.
Exactly. It suggests nothing is wasted, but also that every part and how it's presented carries weight in the system of showing respect.
Respect and resourcefulness, all woven together. And it doesn't stop when the meal ends.
No way. Guests never leave empty-handed. They're always given food to take with them, maybe bread, some meat, dried fish. It's like a final act of generosity.
It reinforces that connection.
Definitely. The source implies this sacred hospitality is crucial for their community resilience. When the environment is harsh, these human bonds, cemented by ritual, become maybe the most vital resource they have.
That dedication to community, to honoring people, makes you think about how they strengthen those bonds during celebrations, too. What about their festivals and faith?
Well, like many Uyghur groups, they observe the main Islamic festivals, Eid al-Fitr after Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice.
And does the source say if one is bigger than the other for them?
It notes that Eid al-Adha tends to be celebrated maybe more grandly, with more festivity.
What does that look like in a Lopnur community? What are people doing?
So alongside the religious observances, these are big cultural events. The source mentions young people playing traditional games like egg-cracking contests, flying kites.
Fine. And the adults?
Adults are busy visiting friends and family, sharing big meals, really reinforcing those social ties we were just talking about. It's a time for communal joy.
And is there anything unique just local to them? The source mentioned Tunek night.
Ah, yes, Tunic Night. That sounds quite distinct. It happens on the 14th night of the Barat month.
What goes on?
It's particularly for the kids, it seems. They have this ritual of burning old scarves, and while they do it, they sing this specific line, Barat came, this night is bright, we'll play until morning light.
Burning scarves and singing. Interesting. So it has religious roots.
The source suggests it does, but it functions now as this really lively, unique, local cultural thing, blending faith, community, tradition. It's quite special.
It shows how these things mix and become really specific to a place. Okay, so from community identity in festivals, let's shift to individual identity. How does that show up in something basic like names?
Names are really meaningful in Lopner culture, according to the source. They're often chosen to reflect something the natural world, hopes for the child, or certain character traits they admire.
The examples in the source were quite strong.
They really are. Names like Yolwas, meaning tiger, or Tumor for iron, Almas is diamond, Aihan means moon king. You see that connection to strength, value, nature.
Powerful imagery. Are there common patterns like suffixes?
Yes, the source mentions common suffixes like John, Han, or Lagal get added to names for both boys and girls. Probably adds nuance, endearment.
And what about nicknames? Seems like they're a big deal too.
Very common, yeah. Often based on personality, maybe a habit or a physical trait. But what's really interesting is the source notes people embrace them with pride.
Embrace them with pride. So they're not seen as like teasing.
Apparently not always. It suggests these nicknames become part of who you are in the community, how people know you, almost like an accepted public identity.
Huh. So your identity is kind of layered, your given name, and maybe a community-given one. Okay, let's move to another big life event, also full of meaning, marriage.
Ah, yes. The marriage customs described sound really rich with symbolism, lots of stages. It might start very subtly. A boy might secretly leave, like a string or maybe a ring in a girl's clothing to show interest.
Secretly. Okay.
Yeah.
How does she respond if she's interested too?
The source says she might give him an embroidered handkerchief in return. It's this quiet, symbolic back and forth confirmation before anything gets formal.
So once that mutual interest is clear, the families get involved.
Exactly. Then come the formal visits between the families, and they have these wonderfully descriptive names for the ceremonies, cup tying and waist binding.
Cup tying, waist binding. The names themselves suggest joining things together.
Precisely. Joining the couple, joining the families.
And gifts are exchanged to make it official.
Yes, a whole range of gifts to seal the engagement. And again, they often reflect the environment, practical things like dried fish, handmade robes, but also symbolic things like jujube. Sometimes even really significant items like boats or valuable fox pelts.
Boats or fox pelts. Wow, that shows serious commitment.
It does. The value is both real and symbolic. And then the bride's arrival at the groom's home. The source describes that with some striking rituals.
Yeah, it sounded quite dramatic. What happens?
Well, when she arrives, she sits on a special ceremonial stone. The source says this is done while wishing for her roots to settle.
Wishing for her roots to settle, like she's planting herself in the new family.
That's the symbolism, yeah. Becoming established. And then there's a dance, and during the dance, her face is unveiled, but not all at once. It's done in 3 layers.
3 layers. Adds a bit of drama and ritual to the reveal.
Exactly. It's all very performative and meaningful.
So, from the joining of lives, let's make another transition to how this culture remembers and honors those who've passed on.
Remembrance in Lopnur culture, as described, goes beyond just prayer. It's very active. The source emphasizes honoring the deceased by preparing their favorite meals, keeping their treasured belongings nearby.
Keeping them present, in a way.
Yes, integrating memory into daily life, maintaining that connection.
And there was a very poignant detail about the person's horse.
That one is particularly moving. The deceased's horse might actually be led in the funeral procession.
Really?
Yeah, carrying the person's clothes, maybe some treasured items, like a silent companion on that final journey. It's a powerful image of loss and that bond.
A very strong visual. And the graves themselves, where are they typically located?
The source mentions places within their landscape, often on sand dunes, or sometimes even using hollowed-out tree trunks. Practical choices, maybe with symbolic resonance, too.
Using natural features again. And there's one last touch, a very personal farewell.
Yes, this custom of whispering a blessing, often poetic, right into the ear of the person before burial. The example given is, "Oh, my brother, we entrusted you to God."
Oh, wow. That's incredibly intimate.
It really is. A final spoken moment of connection, of love, and placing them in God's care.
So when we pull all these threads together, the food from the desert, the sacred hospitality, the festivals, the names, the marriage rituals, the tender farewells, what does this source material tell us is at the core of the Lopnur character?
Mhm.
Their resilience.
The source really boils it down to a few key values: loyalty, hospitality, and courage. And these aren't just nice ideas, they seem like lived necessities shaped directly by that environment. Well, loyalty and hospitality are crucial for community survival when you're isolated, and resources are scarce. You need strong bonds. And courage, well, that's essential just to face the challenges of the desert day after day.
And their sayings capture this so well.
They really do. Phrases like, "Let my life be for the people." That speaks volumes about prioritizing the community, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Or the other one mentioned, better to starve than break a promise.
Right. Underscoring just how vital integrity and trust are when you depend so heavily on each other. These sayings are like the verbal DNA of their survival ethic.
And their practical skills are just as tied to that world.
Completely. They're known as amazing trackers, for example. The source says they can read footprints in the sand like open books. That's not just a skill, it's literacy in their environment. Essential.
Like reading the earth. And we talked about storing food under the sand.
Yeah, using the desert's own properties, cold, dry, stable, to keep food safe from pests. It's just brilliantly simple, born from deep understanding.
Such clever, low-tech solutions. The source even mentioned a pretty drastic measure they used historically for disease outbreaks.
Yes, a really stark ancient response. Facing a disease threat, they would apparently burn their paths behind them and flee far away, using fire itself as a barrier.
Wow, that's extreme.
It is, but it shows their willingness to do whatever it took to survive based on generations of experience in that specific context.
So whether it's building sun-dried houses, weaving carpets, hosting storytelling nights, or these fundamental survival tactics, it feels like their culture isn't separate from their life, it's just completely woven into it.
That's the key takeaway, I think. The source paints a picture where traditions aren't just customs, they're integral, woven into every thread of their being. The desert wasn't just scenery, it actively shaped who they became.
This deep dive into the echoes of Lopnur material really paints a picture of people who didn't just, survive in a tough place. They genuinely thrived, creating this incredibly resilient and beautiful culture.
Absolutely. And what this source material shows so powerfully is how environment and adaptation over long periods don't just shape the practical stuff, food, shelter. They mold the core values, the social fabric, the very character of a people.
So hopefully this exploration has given you a valuable shortcut, those key insights into the unique heritage of the Lopnur Uyghur people, straight from the source material we looked at.
It maybe leaves you thinking about this. How did those extreme desert conditions forge not only the obvious survival skills like the tracking or the food storage, but also those deeper qualities, that profound loyalty, the almost sacred hospitality, the courage that echoes so clearly in their sayings and their way of life?
A powerful question to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll look forward to exploring more sources with you next time.